Hi everyone, it's Lindy on here from Pink Whisper Designs. Today we're going to make a cute little Easter slider card, and we're going to be using some brand new images from Art Impressions. Let's start by creating the card base. This measures 4¼ by 11 inches, and this is the Strathmore Bristol Smooth Heavyweight cardstock. This is a 100-pound. I scored it at 5½ inches, and I'm just pressing that out with the bone folder. So now for the front of the card, we just want to keep 1¾ inches on the front, just part of the front of the card. So I'm using my Fiskars paper trimmer. I'm lining the card up at 1¾ inch, and I've got it the long way on my paper trimmer. And you can see there where I have it lined up at 1¾ inches, and I'm going to cut right up to that score line at the 5½ inches. And then what I'll do is turn this, and we're going to cut that top portion away. And so I'm going to line that up right along the score line and go ahead and cut down to that 1¾ inch mark. And I'm just showing you that's where the blade is, right underneath that center part of the cutting tool. So now I've got that front panel. We can just set that other piece aside. We will need that a little bit later on. So just set that aside for now. Now I'm going to use some Post-it labeling tape. This is a temporary tape. And I'm closing the card so that I can line this up nice and straight. And we're going to be masking off to create our grassy border. So I'm using that tape to mask off the top part of the card. And now I've got my Distress Oxide inks in Twisted Citron and Mowed Lawn. I'm starting off with the Twisted Citron, and I'm using just a blending brush to blend this out. I'll do the front of the card, and as you can see, I have that nice masking paper up at the top, so I'm not going to get any of that ink up in the sky area. And I'll just continue filling in that lower part with the Twisted Citron, and then I'll come in and add a few shadows using that Mowed Lawn. And I'll mostly just have that darker color down towards the bottom of this panel. So now you can see I have the front of the card and the inside of the card done. Next, I want to cut a panel the exact same size as the front flap of the card. So that would be 5½ inches by 1¾ inch. Now we're going to create the slider area for this front panel. And these are the slide on over dies from Fawn. And I'm going to use that longer one. I was thinking I might use that shorter one, but you could certainly use some of these others that are kind of on a curve. But I thought I'd have this go straight across the card. So I'm lining it up about a ½ inch from the top of that panel. You don't want to go too close to the top of the panel because we do need room for our little mechanism. So now you can see I have that cut out. And you do want to make sure that's nice and straight when you cut that out. So you could use your T-square there to make sure you have that die lined up straight. And now I'm doing the same thing I did before, starting with the Twisted Citron, adding some Mowed Lawn, and this will match everything that we've already done. So that, again, is for the front of the card. So let's go ahead and dry this. We want to do some more masking, and our Post-it tape won't stick if that ink is still wet. So I'm using that same piece of Post-it tape. I've just wiped off a little bit of the ink on there, and I flipped it around, and we'll create our sky. This is the Cloud Background Stencil from Fawn, and it's a 2-part stencil. And you can see that it has the Fawn label down at the bottom, and then it has those little etch marks where you can line it up when you do your second part of the stenciling. So I've got my Pink and Main anti-static powder tool. I'm going to lay down some powder because we are going to be embossing this cloudy design. So that'll just take out any static, and then I'm going to line this up in the upper right hand corner, just kind of avoiding that little edge there. And then I'll use the magnets on my Wendy Vecchi Make Art station to hold this in place. Now when I placed that Post-it tape down over the grass, I left a little sliver of that green showing. Here I've got my scrapbook.com domed applicator tool. This is a really great tool to apply this Versamark ink. This is a embossing ink that I'm applying through the openings of the stencil, and that dome applicator is a little bit more firm, so it's allowing me to really press that ink down into those openings. Once I have that done, we can go ahead and emboss this. So I've got my Ranger Super Fine Detail White Embossing Powder, and I'm going to sprinkle that all over these little clouds. And as I was saying before, you want to leave a little sliver of that green showing when you put that Post-it tape down, just so you don't have a gap between the grassy border and the sky color. So now I can remove that tape, and then I'll go ahead and heat set this. So I'm going to emboss this. Make sure your heat tool is nice and hot before you go to your cardstock. And then this will create a really pretty dimensional cloud. And let me show you that up close. You can see I have that nice shine on those clouds. Now let's do part 2 of the stencil. So again, I'm laying that tape down with a little sliver of that green showing. And I've got part 2. So let's go ahead and prep the paper again with the anti-static powder tool. And then we'll line up the second stencil. And again, it has those little etch marks on it, so you know exactly where to line this up. And you do want to make sure I'm looking for that Lawn Fawn logo so that I know that I have the front of the stencil. And now I'm just looking through the stencil to line up those clouds we've already done. Just take a little time there to make sure you get that lined up nicely. And then I can go ahead and put my magnets down and do that same thing we did before. So I'm going to come back in with that embossing ink and my domed applicator, and I'll just pounce that ink right down into those openings. Once I have a nice coating of ink, we can go ahead and emboss this again. And what's going to be really, really cool here is that those clouds overlap. So we're going to get kind of a double embossing in some areas, and it's going to be really pretty. If you have any excess embossing powder where you didn't want it, just use a dry brush and you can easily brush that away. And now you can go ahead and heat set this. So now you can see where those clouds overlap. I just love how that looks. So now let's do the sky. I'm going back to that Post-it tape, placing that down, and then I'm going to grab the Salvaged Patina Distress Oxide ink, and I've got a new blending brush, and I'll go ahead and blend out that sky. So I just applied a nice even coating of that ink over the entire top of the panel, and now I can use a dry towel or a dry paper towel and just wipe away any excess that's on top of those clouds. Because remember, that embossing is acting as a resist. So I can just wipe away any excess on top. And you do want to make sure you wipe that away, because otherwise it will just rub off onto your fingers. I've got a little water on my glass media mat. I'm spattering the entire panel. And then I've got a dry paper towel, and I'm just going to blot up some of those areas. I did this for the grass and the sky. You're going to get these really pretty little spatter effects, which just adds a lot of texture and dimension. And I'll do the same thing for the front pieces of the card. So now that that's all set, take a look at the brand new images we're going to be using. These are the front and back bunnies, and we're going to be using the coordinating dies for that as well. And then I've got the Art Impressions Bunny and Chick set. We're just going to be using those chicks from this set. And again, these are all part of the Watercolor Journal series. And you can see how cute these are. And then I've got, for the last set of images, the Easter Egg House set. I'm going to be using the house and those little bundles of eggs. So I've placed all the images in my Misty stamp positioner. I've got my Versafine Onyx black ink, which is a permanent black ink. I'm going to ink up these stamps, and then I'll use that Stampendable stamp press to press those out. I will stamp some extras of all of these images, the eggs and the little chicks, just so that I have enough to decorate the inside and the outside of the card. Now in the upper left-hand corner, I'll be listing all the colors I'm using today. Here we're going to be using lemon yellow, yellow, orange, sugared almond pink, and light brown to do the little chicks. So I'm putting some sugared almond pink on their cheeks. I'm using the lemon yellow and then the yellow to do my shadowing. I'm using the light brown on their little feet and the orange on the beak. And I did all of those chicks the exact same way. So now I've got the light gray and I'm going to just add a few shadows to my little egg house. I want to keep it mostly white, because we're going to have a lot of color in everything else, in the bunny's outfit and the eggs. So I thought I would keep this fairly light, and again just adding a few shadows. Do keep in mind that all of the products I'm using today are listed and linked down below and also on my blog. I'll add a little bit of the light gray to that door. And then I'm adding the peach pink around the trim on the windows and for my little window boxes. We'll use that same peach pink for the trim around the door. And then the trim around that little window up top. Now I've got cool gray number 3, and we'll add some shadows for the roof, and then I'll just pull that color out towards the edges to keep the top of the roof the lightest. And I am using the Zig blender pen to do all of my blending today, but you could use a water brush here as well if you prefer that. I'm using that same gray to do that little chimney. And now for the windows, I'm going to use that aquamarine blue. I just want to add a little tint to the windows. You could certainly go lighter than this, but I did want it to be a little bit more dramatic. So I'm just adding it off to the right-hand side or the right corner of the windows and then just pulling that up. Now I've got the English lavender. I'm starting with some shadows at the bottom and kind of around the edges of that door, and then I'll keep the center area the lightest. I'm adding a few more shadows, and I'll use that same color to do the shutters. So now let's use that same color again to do the little pants on the bunny. And so whatever color you use on the front of the bunny, you want to use on the back. The back part of the bunny from about the waist down is not going to be showing on my card. I did color it in just so you could see what it looks like. And then I'm switching to the bright yellow for the jacket. Again, I wanted to have the little bunny in fairly bright colors, and I want all those eggs to be nice and bright. So the little egg house I kept on the lighter side, kind of muted really, so that it wouldn't be too distracting to all the other colors that we're using. So now I'm just adding a few little shadows on the jacket. I've got that sugared almond pink. I'm going to add it to the cheeks and to the ears. And then for this bunny, I'm going to have a light gray. I just want the bunny to look mostly white, so I'm just using that light gray to add a few little shadows. And then I'll pull that in towards the center, again keeping the center of the face mostly white. You can come back in and add some more of that sugared almond pink if you need to. And then for the shirt underneath, I'm going back to that peach pink, and I'm going to add that to the shirt. And for the egg that this little bunny is holding, I'm using the purple. I'll add that color down towards the bottom of the egg, and then I'll just pull it up towards the top. And I did the same thing for the other side. So now let's do the eggs. I'm just going to show you a few of these. I'm just going to repeat the colors we've already used. So anywhere where these eggs touch, I'm going to add a little bit of shadow. And for the ones that are down along the bottom here, I'm using the turquoise green, and I'm adding the shadow at the bottom and pulling that up towards the top. And again, I've got the peach pink. And so I did color the rest of all of these little eggs off camera, and let me give you a closer look at everything. And I just think these images are just so sweet. So now, again, the bunny set had coordinating dies. And for the rest of the images, unfortunately, there are no dies, but I'm going to quickly use my detail scissors and cut those out, and I'll leave a little tiny white border all the way around. So let's go ahead and run the bunnies through the die cutting machine. I'm using the Sizzix Sidekick machine. And you can see how cute these are. So these are all our images cut out. So now let's grab a sentiment. This is the Art Impressions Easter Sentiment set. Again, a brand new set. And I'm going to grab a few sentiments. For the front of the card, I'm going to use that hippity hoppity. And I had already cut this sentiment in half. I cut the stamp in half for another card that I created, but you can see that you can easily just place these right back together and keep that as one long sentiment, just the way it was intended. So I'm going to just line those up, and then I'll go ahead and ink those up. I'm going to emboss these, so I'm going back to that anti-static powder tool and that Versamark ink pad, and we'll go ahead and stamp this. Once I have that stamped, we can go ahead and emboss it. I'm going to be using that same Ranger Superfine Detail White embossing powder. And you do want to make sure this panel is nice and dry before you do your stamping on here. So if you need to heat set it or set it aside till it's completely dry, because you don't want that embossing powder to stick. Now I've grabbed another sentiment from that same set, and this sentiment on the inside will say, "Just hopping by to wish you joy this Easter day." So that's really cute. So I'm doing the same exact thing. We'll go ahead and emboss this, and then we can quickly heat set that. So now that's how the card will come together. I did decide, since I did a lot of inking and a lot of embossing on that card panel, I wanted to cut another piece of white cardstock the exact same size as the card, which is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, and add it to the back. I wanted to give it a little bit more substance. So now I've got some 3D foam tape, and I'm doubling it over. So this will be twice the height of the normal foam tape. And I'm using my Tim Holtz titanium shears to cut right down the center of this. And again, I've doubled it. And now I can remove the backing from one side, and we can go ahead and place this down. I'm placing that penny in there because that is where our mechanism will be. So I want to make sure I don't have any tape interfering with that mechanism. So let's go ahead and put this tape around 3 sides of this panel. And then you'll see that on that 4th side, I did decide to make that tape a little bit narrower. I didn't want it to get in the way of that. That little penny is part of the mechanism, and I just thought it was a little bit too close. I'm just checking it again there. And I am going to cut off maybe about 1/8 of an inch just to be safe. And then I'll go ahead and attach that. So now you can see that penny will move freely down in that little channel. And now I'm going to add a little bit more tape in the 2 little corners, and then the corners up at the top. Again, you want to make sure it's not going to interfere with that penny moving and sliding. Now for the penny, I want to put a little strip of this foam tape right down the center of the penny. I want to make sure it's not too wide. It's got to fit in that little channel there. It's also doubled up. And now you can see that will fit right in that channel. And that will create our little slider mechanism. So I'm using the anti-static powder tool just to make sure that there's no sticky anywhere on this cardstock that might again interfere with anything. I'm adding a little bit to the penny so it slides nicely in this channel. And now I've got my little front and back bunny. I'm going to go ahead and glue this together. And it's perfectly symmetrical, so it'll line up exactly. And then that little bunny is going to sit on that little penny. And I'm using kind of the widest point of the bunny where the tail is to tape that down. And now you can see that's going to move really cute in that channel. And from the back side, we'll see his head and him holding up that little egg. Now I did decide to add just a little bit more tape. Now that I know where that penny is, I'm going to add a little bit more of that foam tape down towards the bottom, just to make sure this sits up on my card nicely and doesn't get crushed when it goes through the mail. Now I can remove the backing from all of that tape and attach it to the front of the card. You do want to take a little time. Make sure you line that up nice and straight. Now you can see, and it will take a little time for this to get going, so just kind of keep moving it back and forth. You can move it with your fingers as well, and then once you do that a few times, it'll move along nice and easily. So now we're going to add all of these little pieces that we cut and colored, and I'm going to start with the little egg house. I'll place this up towards the left hand side, and that will show through from the front of the card, so that's going to be really cute. And then we'll start adding some little chicks, and the little eggs, we'll just kind of sprinkle those around for color. And I am just checking to see where that little bunny is going to be when he slides around, just because I want to make sure, again, he's not interfering or getting interfered with any of these objects. So for the eggs, I want to make sure they're not in the way as that slides back and forth. And I just love these new images. They're so cute for Easter. This is such a fun card. I did use the bunny and chick set to do a pivot pop-up card, and I can link that down below for you if you're interested in seeing that, because that was really fun to do. When you open up the card, it pops out the little pivot. It twists and pops up towards you. So it's really fun and very interactive. So again, you can see that I keep checking the little bunny there to make sure that nothing's interfering with him moving along. And then I thought it would be fun to add a few items off to the left-hand side, just for a little bit more interest when you open up the card. And again, you can see that little bunny poking through from the front side of the card. I just love that. I think that's so cute. Now we will be adding a little bit more interest to some of those eggs, and that's what's fun with the little eggs. You can personalize them, add some stripes and polka dots, and also to the house as well if you wanted to. You could certainly add some interest to that little egg house. So let's grab this last little chick and put him up towards the top. And then I've got my Signo White Gel Pen, and here again is when I'm going to add some highlights. I'll add a few polka dots here and there. And then I've got my Wink of Stella glitter pen. This is just a clear glitter pen, and I'm adding it to those windows. and a little bit to his tail and to his nose. Now you can see this easily slides back and forth. So let's take a closer look at the finished card, and I just love those clouds in the background. They just add a lot of interest and a little bit of shine. And then we've got the cute little bunnies and chicks. So I really hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, please hit the like button and subscribe. And don't forget to hit that notification bell so that you don't miss a single video. As always, thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you all have a great day. Take care. Bye-bye.